people can remain stuck in survival states for long periods of time. Or they may get triggered into those survival states when something similar enough happens to the original trauma. So I welcome you all, and we will be covering a lot of different information together. This is a training around embodiment and how being connected to our bodies is one of the ways that we can increase our resilience and shift out of what I'm going to call trauma physiology. And I'll go deeper into the theory, but I also would like to offer you some practice. So my hope is at the end of this webinar, you will have some tools, you will have some ways of engaging yourselves and your clients that will help you to regulate, that will help you to come back into a sense of connection, or for you to even notice when you're stressed, right? Especially as helpers, sometimes we go into the hyperdrive mode and we're not taking care of ourselves in the ways that we need to. But this is very interesting because it's different than doing yoga or making a meal or going for a walk. These are ways to internally attend to yourself at any given moment. And that's one of the wonderful things about this work, is that it just takes some deepening of conscious awareness of what state you're in, and then some ways to begin to know what helps you to regulate, what helps you to begin to shift, and how do you feel when you're feeling better. We miss that a lot, right? We do something, we notice that we feel more awake, but we don't take time to drop in and really sense and feel what that positive change is like. And when we do that, it often creates more sense of opening, more regulation. So let's move into some of the material. Okay, we're going to do some theory, we'll do some experiential exercises, we're going to learn some stabilization tools. Okay, I am going to share a few slides, and we have translation of these slides, and we'll put them into PDF form. Esther, it would be great. Let's put them into PDF form, and then we'll send them to you. So these slides up here will be in English, but I'll be speaking about the slides, so the interpreter, you'll be able to hear through the interpretation what they're about, and then know you'll receive them afterwards. Okay. Esther, can you see that? Great. So I thought a lot about the title to this, and I'd like to even change some of it, is, increasing resilience in times of war, but it's in times of need. And right now we have so much global need in so many ways. I know many of you are working with refugees from Ukraine. We have refugees from many other global conflicts. We have a global pandemic that, as a collective, we've been challenged by, and also invited in a way to come together as never before. And when I see all of your faces and all of the names, even if you're not on the screen, it brings in, for me, a feeling of hope. And that's something that can increase resilience, right? What's the feeling of hope in your body? So we'll talk about how responders, therapists, helpers can support yourself while supporting others. We know that regulation is very important, and in many ways, that is what we'd like to begin to bring more of to the people that we serve. I did want to just recognize that as I go through some of these slides, they were shared with me by Ariel Giaretto, who is one of our SE trainers, Elsbeth Hortbati, and Elaine Miller-Karras, and then a lot of them are my slides too. So here's some of the things that we're going to learn. One, what are the signs of stress and trauma? We'll talk about that in behavior, but really what I would like to offer you is how does that show up in the body and physiology? Okay. How the body and the autonomic nervous system, we'll talk a lot about the autonomic nervous system, responds to events in order to protect us. We'll talk about ways to connect to the autonomic nervous system with awareness. Some of that awareness is going to be connected to bodily sensation. A fancy word for awareness of sensation is interoception. So we're going to use some ways of learning and teaching ourselves and our clients some more interoception. And then the question is, once we know how we feel, what do we do? Or what happens next? So we will introduce stabilization tools. One of the assistants has volunteered to do a demonstration. So you'll get to actually see how we might offer someone stabilization tools. As I'm doing the demonstration, I'm going to encourage you all to do some of it with us. Just on the screen, you can try out some of the skills as I'm leading our assistant. How also we can build embodied resources, things that help us to feel better, things that aren't the trauma, things that aren't the overwhelm. And how that begins to, I'm going to call it, counteract unreleased survival physiology. Begins to create from more fixed states of stress and overwhelm, movement, flow, something that's different, so that we can actually, what we call pendulation, we move back and forth between states of stress and states of betterness, or states of stabilization. And so that I'll model that, and we also have another assistant that is going to come up and do a demonstration. So we call that pendulation. And in pendulation, we'll model how to do debriefing. Many of you are meeting refugees, you're supporting them, helping them to get their basic needs met, hearing some of their stories. So with this idea of pendulation and stabilization in the nervous system, there's a way that very naturally you can help to guide the rhythm of the conversation that will intrinsically help the nervous system to regulate better. So that's my goal in the time that we have together. Please take care of yourselves, move if you need to, get some tea. You don't have to stay stuck in your seat. It is an embodied training. So the concepts that I'm bringing forward to you are from a modality called somatic experiencing. Somatic means body-oriented, and experiencing is a verb. So it means it's the experience of the body in the present moment. So we're always asking people, what are you noticing in your body right now? Not what were you noticing in your body during the trauma or in the past. So as you talk about that, what are you noticing in your body right now? Okay, so it's present centered. The healing happens in the here and now. So what we are looking for is some kind of a state change in the body right here with you. Okay. Now, part of this work developed by Dr. Peter Levine, a core premise, I would say, is that trauma is not in the event, but it's held in ongoing signaling of survival physiology. Survival physiology in the body. The body primes itself to protect itself, and it's not able to release or resolve that priming or that signaling. So people can remain stuck in survival states for long periods of time. Or they may get triggered into those survival states when something similar enough happens to the original trauma, right? So it can be a change at baseline, or it can be something that happens repetitively when something from the environment reminds really the lower brain, the instinctual brain, and then we move into some of these heightened responses. So let's talk about some different kinds of symptoms that we might see under high stress. And you'll probably recognize some of these symptoms in the people that you serve. And you may also notice some of these symptoms in yourselves and also with some of your coworkers. So extreme anxiety and vigilance. So this is where we're on high alert. You might see swinging between panic and depression. Difficulty falling asleep and insomnia, very common, right, when there's a lot of high anxiety or charge. Greater irritability, and that can lead to outbursts of anger. We'll see what we call, labile emotions, big emotions, changeable emotions, mood swings. And in that, a lot of people wonder, am I going crazy? Why do I feel so out of control? There can be changes in eating. People start to eat more. Many people start to eat less. They lose their appetite. Okay. Increased use of alcohol, drugs, and painkillers. These kinds of external reaching is often an attempt for people to regulate, but they're using something external, and we like to help them to have something more internal. Body aches, pain, this would be more somatization. Kids show this a lot with trauma, right? Increased headaches, stomach aches. Okay. Lack of energy, lethargy, it's hard to get out of bed. Lack of concentration, so there's the physiological response of trauma, but the mental toll too. A lot of the time we have a difficult time retrieving information, staying on track. There can be levels of dissociation or disconnection, right? So even to the extent of remembering something that happened a moment before. And this shows up feeling confused or foggy. There can be experiences of being numb, inability to stay present. And they could also be caught in the past, but also kind of trying to predict the future. What's next? To some degree, that's important. Planning is important, but high anxiety around what's next, right? Okay, one more big list, and then we'll move on to to some more charts and things. But again, these are some of the different possibilities that we also might see. And this is more of compassion fatigue. So compassion fatigue is a word that we use for secondary trauma. Now, I'm a trauma therapist, and many people ask me, how can you do that? Well, for me, a lot of the metaphor, I think of the phoenix from the ashes. That it can be a challenging process, but it's one of transformation. But as we hear the trauma of our clients and the people we serve, we also are the wounded healers. Many of us go into these paths of healing because we have our own trauma. So we might also begin to notice that our trauma is kindled. Sometimes we're part of that globally. Again, we are in collective trauma, but we also have collective resilience. And that's really important to remember. So, as a trauma therapist, I really want to be watching myself, right, for excess consumption of alcohol, drugs, food, again, anything where I'm externally trying to regulate and I'm not tending to myself. Anger, irritability, feelings of resentment and dread. It could be sometimes too that you start to show up late, right? You start to drag your feet. You start to have a hard time getting out of bed. There can be, again, I was just talking to someone who was saying that they're starting to miss appointments, which they had never done before. So, again, you can watch some of the things behaviorally that might show up as, I wonder if I'm feeling some compassion fatigue. I'm wondering if I need to begin to focus more on my own regulation. Depression, hopelessness, exhaustion. Here is a really big one, right? Which is overly high expectations of oneself. Yeah. And in many ways that connects to the chronic need, right? The depth of the need, and we're all ready to go and wanting to mobilize. But again, just be sort of watching some of that. Failing to maintain a balance between empathy and objectivity. You might see that there could be some kind of loosening around boundaries, right? Taking on too much responsibility. You take on that client at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night, right? Or you start to take calls on your day off in between, so the check-in calls. Having difficulty leaving work at the end of the day. Also, maybe even trying to have a sense of control by overly controlling the lives of others, right? You might get into some of these patterns, hyperdrive, right? Of a fix-it mode that you can't get away from, right? And then your partner and your kids are getting more and more irritated with you. Difficulty in connecting and surrounding with reality. That's again more of the disconnection, feeling of chronic disconnection. And you might also find that you have disruptions in your sleep. Okay. So, lots of symptoms. I'm sure many of you could add to this, right? Many of you could add to it from times and experiences that you've had in your life or things that you've seen. So those are some symptom lists, but let's move away from that and into some more of looking at this through the physiology, because that's the unique lens that I would like to bring to you all today. So here we have a slide, and you'll see it's labeled, the two blue lines are the window of tolerance. And it's going to show autonomic nervous system, ANS is autonomic nervous system, regulation, Okay, now, there we go. There's a wave within this window of tolerance. And the up arrow, or when that moves upward, it's showing engagement in the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is around excitation. Excitation could be positive or it could be negative. I'm so excited to see you all today, right? Or it might be that somebody is feeling afraid to go outside. Okay? Those are both excitation, but we interpret the states differently. The downward arrow there is the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is responsible within this window of tolerance for relaxation. We call it the rest and digest. Okay? Now, throughout a day, you're going to have fluctuation or movement in a wave of excitation and settling cycles. Excitation and settling cycles, right? So, last night I was in a deep sleep and our eldest child came and woke us up because he had a really bad tummy ache. So, right, I wake up and I feel worried, right? I'm there and my heart rate goes up. I get a little bit tense. I'm thinking about action. What do we need to do? And then, we head back down and I kind of get him settled again. I sit with him. I hold his tummy, hold his shoulders. He starts to breathe more deeply. He falls asleep. And I'm settling too, right? My nervous system is coming down. Similarly, let's talk a little bit about professionally. You are sitting with someone who is talking to you about having to have left everyone behind. And as you're hearing this, you begin to notice, right, your heart rate is beating faster. You feel some tension in your shoulders and in your jaw. And your legs are gripped. Okay. And then as the person is sharing, they begin to say they've been surprised by the kindness that they've found, though, that there have been some people that have helped them. And as you hear that, you begin to notice a softening in your chest, a warmth in your heart or in your torso, and your legs begin to relax. Okay? So again, where our nervous systems will be resonating with what we hear and how we attune in any given moment. Now with trauma, what we see is more of a dysregulated response in the nervous system. Okay. And the lightning bolt there is, it sort of is a representation of trauma. Sometimes trauma is like a lightning bolt from out of the blue, right? Other times there's developmental trauma, right? Too little, too long, over a long period of time. But whatever this event or these multiple events are, it creates a dysregulated pattern in the nervous system. And what we see is people who get stuck on high in the sympathetic nervous system and people who get stuck on low or stuck on off in the parasympathetic nervous system. So remember, people who are stuck in sympathetic, that's excitation, okay? We'll see symptoms like anxiety, panic, excessive heightened startle response, hyperactivity, certainly see that a lot with kids, insomnia, difficulty relaxing, right? Difficulty settling, restlessness, a lot of hypervigilance, right? What's going to happen next? Digestive problems. When we're in a heightened state, we're not interested in digesting our food. Emotional flooding and extreme emotions, right? You see that those big responses. Now, similarly, people can get stuck on off. Okay, and in this, you're going to see things like depression, flat affect, right? Lethargy, low impulse, so sort of have difficulty with motivation, difficult getting out of bed, difficult accomplishing basic tasks, feeling exhausted, almost to the level of chronic fatigue. You can also see pain patterns that show up here. Sometimes too, complex syndromes, low blood pressure, similarly too, you have poor digestive issues. When we're in this stuck on off, we can actually dissociate or disconnect from ourselves in many different states. But some people may dissociate. And the more stuck on off you are, there is a tendency to kind of leave the survival physiology because it feels so overwhelming. So what do we see with dissociation? It's feeling disconnected, it's feeling floaty. There's also numbness. So we would look for that disorientation and actually help people to recognize this is a normal response to trauma. Your body and your physiology is in a survival state. And there's a disconnection when we feel overwhelmed. We go somewhere else. So what are some of the tools and what are some ways that we can invite people to gently come back? To notice in their physiology where they're stuck, and then find some different ways to regulate or come out of these fixed states of heightened nervous system arousal. Okay. So when I work with someone, a lot of the time, I will bring in this window of tolerance model, and we will draw a chart together and we'll talk a little bit about the physiology and their physiology. So Judith has volunteered to do an exercise with me. We're going to model how you would do this in clinical practice. Can we spotlight Judith and myself? And then double spotlight Judith. Yes, perfect. Excellent. And can you unmute your microphone?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for volunteering.
Yeah, pleasure.
So in that nervous system chart that we just saw, I can do a very quick variation of it. And we get that up and down, sympathetic, parasympathetic. That's my quick chart of it. SNS, PNS, there's the wave up and below the line. Judith, when you're under stress, where does your nervous system tend to go?
Well, the tendency is very clear up, activated.
Okay. So sympathetic
Yes.
activation. Okay. And may I ask, when you're in that sympathetic activation, what are some of the sensations that you feel in your body?
Well, I start to lose contact with my legs, particularly my feet and my lower legs. And I start to feel a kind of a pressure or constriction here. Not so much in my head, but I also feel, in a way, energized. There is a lot of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice, I've learned through the years from my training and working with myself, that I call it hectic. when I sense myself or when I can hear that I'm speaking hectic. Yeah. Or when I'm acting very fast, I feel very effective, but actually it's too fast. And I'm not in touch with this so good, but afterwards. So speaking fast, acting fast, and my thoughts, I think very fast. I think fast also when I am in a more balanced state, but it's really rapid.
Yeah, and there's a almost a different quality when you can have clarity and be thinking, quickly and on your feet, and then but this hectic, right? It's
It's
more
a
dysregulated.
complete, you get it very clearly. It's a complete different way of being. In the moment, I feel very efficient and effective, but actually, there is a kind of tunnel. So there is a lot I don't see, I don't hear, or if there comes some responses from the outside, I feel it's just disturbing. Away with it. It disturbs my focus or
Yeah.
my little tunnel.
So
Mhm.
yeah, great description. So we have, a embodied report in a way. We've heard the sensations that go with it. You described those very well. And then you also have behaviors, right? That you notice, the talking fast or the thinking. And then there's also this sort of perceptual tunnel that happens.
Yeah.
What about emotionally, Judith? Is there anything that you notice emotionally when you're in that high?
Well, emotionally, before I say emotionally, I also want to say something I have discovered more of the last years, and it's when I'm up here, there's always too little time.
Oh, uh-huh.
There is always a lack of time. And even if I can, I either look at my watch or I know that there isn't really, but the sense I have is there will not be time enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like an urgency. So
Like an urgency. That's a
the
very good, yeah,
physiology of the urgency.
yeah. That's
Mm.
a very good word. And emotionally, I would say that I feel afterwards, I can sense that I felt that I was in danger. Not threatening, but danger or alert. Watch out. You better watch out. So there is a sense of that the environment, and it might just be a few people or might be many people, I don't feel as present or trusty as I usually do. Like, watch out. That would be a good sentence.
Okay.
A bit
Yeah.
of mistrust, I would say.
Mhm. So this is wonderful. We've identified several different emotions, behaviors, thoughts, and meanings, and
Mhm.
also the physiology of this place, right? This place that you can get fixed into. May I ask, are there one or two things that you do that you've learned that helps you to downregulate or come back more into the window of tolerance?
Yes, particularly somatic experiencing have been so helpful just to know that it's more about my body. So it's about breathing. So when I hear this hectic talking, I focus on breathing. Or sometimes when I'm very stuck in this, I usually watch out and I find something that I like to look. It doesn't have to be very beautiful, but something that my eyes like to stay watching. And then I stay with it, and sometimes I just name inside 3 or 4 characteristics. And then I return to myself again. And often, most often, I notice that there's a change, and there is a change in breathing, and there is a change of, well, the environment seems more friendly or to be able to interact with, not watching out.
Uh-huh. So not on guard,
Not on
but
guard, that's a good word. Yeah.
yeah, able to be that friendliness of the environment. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And when you think about that feeling of being more in your body, What are some of the sensations that go with that for you internally?
Well, the sensations are very clearly like sinking. It's like I feel in a way the gravity, like I say yes to the sense of gravity pushing me down. And I usually often sense the floor in a different way, but it's really this sinking
Hmm.
instead of.
Yeah. Yeah, and that sinking a lot of the time is a feeling of settling. Our
Yeah,
musculature releases so we actually can feel the ground that
yeah.
supports us more. And a
And
slowing, right, from that high sympathetic and then slowing more into the rest and the digest. And there can be expansion that happens too, right?
true, there
Opening,
can be
widening.
often expansion in my chest area, or sometimes it's a kind of what you call elongation that I actually feel that I sense as if I'm taller than I am real life. And that's a beautiful sensation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Before we close our time together, is there anything else you want to share or say with me or the group?
Just that it has been very valuable to get this awareness and this, you could call it tool, knowing that I'm not a prisoner of being up here. I cannot stop these reactions because they come so fast and immediate or automatic. But I can indeed, as soon as I become aware, I know that there is something I can really respond and change.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
So you can keep me on the main view here. I'm going to go back to gallery view since it's so lovely to see you all. So let's take a look at some of what we were exploring around the nervous system. And then after this, I'm going to show you another exercise about tracking the nervous system. And then we'll go into stabilization tools and the demonstration so you can see what Judith was talking about. What are some of the things that she's learned and some of the things you can learn in this webinar. Before we do that, this is an important slide because it shows the body's responses in both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic branches. Again, you will receive a copy of all of these slides translated into Hungarian, and thank you for all of the efforts for Esther and the team to make these available. So I actually just see that somebody on this slide wrote warm bath, cold shower. That's kind of funny. But you've got the sympathetic, so sympathetic for excitation. What are some of the things that we might see in the body? You imagine that you're running. Okay, just imagine if you're running, what happens in the body when you're running? Okay, you're not going to want to digest your food. Your body wants to mobilize. You're going to have an accelerated heart rate. The pupils will dilate. It dilates the bronchi. You want your bronchi to begin to bring more oxygen. You're pumping oxygen into the blood for action. You're not going to be digesting your food. So, and you're not really interested in elimination as well. So there's inhibiting peristalsis. There's sugars that are being created for energy, adrenaline, noradrenaline. But again, as you look at this chart, these are things that we can see in our own bodies, or we can feel it in our own bodies. We can also see it in the clients that we're sitting with. Now, if somebody suddenly gets thirsty when they're working with me, they could be dehydrated, or they could be moving into a more sympathetically dominant state. Okay. I notice their breathing pattern increases as we're talking about something, right? They're faster, shallower breath, right? You can see heartbeat on a lot of the time on clothing. You can see the increase in heartbeat. Or someone says, my heart is beating like a drum. It's beating so fast, right? I still feel as if I'm in danger right now, even though I know I'm in a relative pocket of safety. but I'm anxious all the time. Now, moving over to the parasympathetic, this is more in the rest and digest. It's going to stimulate the flow of saliva, right? You'll see a change in the pupil. We're going to digest our food. We're going to rest. The heart rate is going to slow down. We don't need to get away or escape. We don't need to fight or flee. The constriction in the bronchi actually is just not opening it really so quickly that we need that fast breath. So that just means that you're going to see these longer, slower, wider breaths. Breath is a very good indicator of how to notice change in the nervous system. You'll have increased peristalsis. You'll have the releasing of bile. So many of these things also just kind of good metabolic function with elimination and digestion. So let's do an exercise here. I would like you to be able to see, I call this the what goes up must come down exercise. And I do this with my clients. I also do it with children a lot too. But the idea is that you have them get a feeling of what the sympathetic nervous system feels like, what the transition state between sympathetic to parasympathetic feels like, and what parasympathetic nervous system feels like. Okay, so we could call it an activation deactivation cycle. We could call it an excitation and settling cycle, or activation and settling cycle. There's a lot of different names that we might call it. But the better that we get in tracking this inside of ourselves and in others, the more you can aid the nervous system. All right, so Daphne is going to do this next exercise.
I'm here for you.
Wonderful. So let's pin both of us. And I
Should
see
I
you
move?
moved out into the garden.
Will you be able to see me? Maybe I'll just. Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, that's great.
I'm ready for it.
Okay. All right. So the invitation would be to do some sort of vigorous action. So you could run in place, you can jump around.
Okay.
Let's just get your sympathetic nervous system up and moving. Okay, great. I bet it's rocking at this point. So let's take a moment and maybe just step back a little bit if you don't mind so we can see a bit more of you still.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Great. That's good. Oh, even better. Yeah, that's wonderful. So I'm going to invite you as you take a moment and you're feeling your breath in your body.
So hello, Daphne. Yes.
Right, and notice another sympathetic response, right? As you have
the distraction even got me more holding myself.
Yeah. So what are some of the sensations that you're experiencing now in this heightened sympathetic?
I really feel my arms like with ants, full of ants, my front arms.
Uh-huh.
I'm having difficulty catching my breath.
Okay.
And I feel a bit constriction in my diaphragm.
Okay. So let's take some time, kind of drop underneath the words for a moment and just noticing your body, feeling your feet on the ground.
They're shaking, my legs are shaking.
Okay. Legs start to shake. Yeah. Right. And one of the things I'm just going to report from the outside, if that's okay, you can see, this sort of constricted breath. It's kind of tight and more up and down like this. Yeah. But it's starting, it was fast, and now every once in a while we're seeing like a kind of a longer, deeper breath. And there's
Yes.
some shakiness as in the legs from all of that action.
The
Here.
more my breath deepens, I feel more expansion in my legs and my arms. I feel more space. It's not as condensed anymore.
Wonderful, wonderful. So just taking some time to sense, things begin to open more, and there's even a deeper breath and little bits of movement there in the neck.
I started to feel my upper legs and the soles of my feet are more present.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting because there's both presence that happens, but as we move in this transition, your body is getting more weighted too, right? So as your muscles begin to soften, you can actually feel more of the contact with the earth.
Yes.
Mhm.
Mm. And I started to be more aware of the sounds around me. I hear the birds, I feel the footsteps of people moving. Before I was really, I was stuck in my own mind trying to feel. Now I
Yes.
feel the expansion around me also.
Wonderful, right? So when we're in that high sympathetic, a lot of the time, that is what's calling our attention, and we lose contact. So as there's this settling cycle, you begin to orient, auditory orienting, right? In particular, and then the environment. So sensing the environment again. I'm noticing too some more, it looks like your arms have dropped, like more relaxation in the arms and kind of through the torso as well.
Yes. I feel my shoulder, I'm not holding my shoulders as tight anymore. I feel my arms are hanging more loose.
Yes. So as you can see, we're having this sort of a dialogue back and forth, some of my observations and some of the felt sense from the inside. Yeah, and we're kind of moving past that transition phase, and now we're moving more towards parasympathetic. It's still happening.
I felt like moving my wrists, like the joints needed something. I don't know what, but
Yeah, so a sense of some sort of exploratory, spontaneous movement. And that was the first breath that I saw that really started to expand more laterally like this, right? So the rib cage starts to breathe outward. Yeah, there we go. And again, more, and I'm tracking breath wave that actually expanded this way. And so I'm wondering, what are you sensing now?
I feel warmth in my belly, lightness, like my arms and my legs are lighter, but it's interesting. They're more, I feel more grounded, but I feel lightness also at the same time.
Yeah, wonderful. So this is often a state too, as we come out of these heightened states, there can be a sense of relaxed readiness or relaxed vitality, right? So you can feel your life force. There's energy there, but it's sort of grounded and expanded in the container.
Yes, since it started to open, I really feel more spacious that I
Mm,
can, as you said, I can move around and in my body. It feels.
wonderful. So we'll bring this exercise to a close. Is there anything else that you want to say or share?
Thank you. I really feel the great shift from one condensed, stiff, vibrant place to a more open and breathing and calm place very quickly, actually. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so wonderful example of that excitation, transition, and settling cycle. And that's something that you might begin to notice in your own body. So you check in with yourself. What am I feeling in my body right now? Am I constricted? Am I buzzy? Right? Am I collapsed? Am I numb? Right? So we can begin to kind of sense into some of our own physiology and then hopefully gain some tools. I want to talk about this phase that we saw between sympathetic moving down towards parasympathetic, because for ourselves, when we work with people who are in survival physiology, right, our own survival physiology gets kindled. That's part of human nature. You're all here because you have gifts and talents in being great empathizers. You're good at resonating. You're talented healers. So our bodies are going to be responding in the field of survival physiology throughout each session, throughout each day. So what are things that we can do for ourselves after each session or at the end of the day that help us if we're stuck or potentiated or in a certain state? We drop underneath our conscious radar, we become aware of the internal state, and then we do something that helps it to release or discharge. Okay. Now, here are a few autonomic nervous system responses that you might feel as your body releases out of deep parasympathetic lockdown or high sympathetic arousal. If you're working with refugees, if you're working with people who have experienced trauma, if they start to feel any of these sensations as you're exploring, we'll talk more about tracking sensations soon, invite them to take time to allow the response to happen, not to block it from the higher brain. And so here is a list of some of what we would call discharge or transition states, right? Things that help transition us out of survival physiology. Okay. Here's the list. Gentle shaking or trembling. So Daphne had a little bit of that in that it was the very beginning. Actually, there was a sympathetic, but all of that kind of the ants in the arms, that was increased circulation, but then there was sort of like, movement out through the fingers here. You can see some people, these kinds of shaky movements, right? Or somebody might, I'll actually come on screen, I'll show you for a moment when I'm larger. Heat. So as we come out of this freeze response or the shutdown response or out of high sympathetic, there might be heat that starts to move. Okay, warmth, sweating. The heat should move and spread and resolve. And then afterward, the person is breathing more deeply, they're feeling better. I actually didn't ask Daphne that, if she felt temperature shifts, but I don't know if you were tracking some of the skin tone. Sometimes you can see it in skin tone. Sometimes a person will report that they're feeling the movement of heat. There's an experience of heat in the sympathetic and then the cooling as somebody moves more towards parasympathetic, not cold, right? That's more of the shutdown. Okay. But if heat is moving, track it for a while and see if it resolves and if the person feels better. Tingling, a wave of tingling that moves through, or vibration. As people settle, you could see, right, Daphne's breath becoming more and more deeper and more involuntary as we sat with the process. And there were times where we dropped back underneath the words and we kind of let the nervous system just move in the direction it was moving. And every once in a while, I'd check back in with her, because you can't rush the nervous system, right? It's going to unfold in its own process. areas of the body relax, right? So from tension in the belly to more relaxation and openness and warmth in the belly. Burping, gurgling, softening in the viscera. Also really helpful, right? When we come out of a trauma response, we want to be able to digest our food, right? An impulse to stretch or move that also happened in this brief demonstration was as Daphne's body was more relaxed, this kind of exploratory vitality came up and there was movement, right? Or maybe an area that's constricted, the person moves or senses differently. There can be emotional discharge like laughter, crying, not desperation crying, but tears of release and relief. An explanation, I survived, right? I'm here, I'm alive. Pronking is sort of the celebration of life that can happen as sort of people will expand and they'll feel gratitude. That's another feeling sometimes that comes in. Victory or success. I'll talk about the complication with survivor guilt in a little while, because I imagine a few of you have that in your awareness when we're talking about this. So we're talking about the nervous system. We're also talking about what we're going to call the lower brain. And I'm not going to go into the depth of neuroscience. You can read In an Unspoken Voice by Dr. Peter Levine if you want more information. But the lower brain is this instinctual brain. It responds to threat. It responds to threat before our conscious rational brain even knows about it, right? So these instinctual responses are in the lower brain and in the nervous system. So we want to engage people's lower brain, the brainstem, the amygdala, the warning center of the brain, has a lot to do with salient emotional experiences. The limbic system, the emotional brain. Okay? The rational thinking brain we'll get to later. You might get a little bit of information, but then go, okay, I hear you, rational thinking brain. Let's go underneath and see how is trauma survival physiology still signaling and what might we do to help? Oh, we're getting somebody's screen. So what we'd like to do is, let's see, can you check screen sharing and come out of screen sharing? There we go. Okay, great. So we want to engage this lower brain. How do we do that? Well, we begin to speak to it directly. And one of the ways to speak to it directly is through the language of sensation. Okay. Now, there's a researcher named Dr. Bud Craig who has found a place in the brain called the insula or the insular cortex. He didn't find it. They actually knew about the insular cortex, but he discovered the function of it. And the insular cortex is involved when we bring conscious awareness to bodily sensation. So you have sensations happening in your body all the time that you're not paying attention to, right? And many of us with survival physiology are not paying attention to the feelings in our bodies because it's so overwhelming. Right? But when we bring conscious awareness to sensation, so I just noticed it's snowing today here, and my hands feel cold. My office is in the coldest part of the house, but I'm wearing fuzzy shoes. So my feet feel warm, and I brought my attention to the feeling of the warmth in my feet and the coolness in my hands. And as I'm doing that, if you were to place me in a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine or an fMRI, you'd see the insular cortex lighting up, right? There's blood flow, metabolic exchange going on. Now, one of the things I like to try to do is to teach people this process of interoception, or noticing how your body feels in any given moment. Some people will not have that capacity. If they don't, what we'll learn at the end of the webinar will be one of the things that you can do that doesn't ask them about sensation. Okay. But for some people, it's just a new orientation. Most people can get a sense of something that's tight and something that's more relaxed. Something that's warmer in my body, something that's colder in my body. Some place that feels solid, some place that feels energy. Right now we're getting even more sophisticated, right? But we begin to develop some curiosity around these internal states. Okay. So one of the ways that it's been spoken about in SE is courting the reptilian brain. Courting the reptilian brain and finding the language of the sensation. So here's a few options that you have. And we're going to take a break soon, just to let you know. Well, I'm going to have a 15-minute break in just a moment. So what are you noticing? What are you experiencing? What are you feeling in your body right now? I might even change this to be more specific. What sensations are you noticing in your body right now? Okay. See if some people can begin to become aware of that. Maybe even in yourself. Just check to see if you can feel an area that feels warmer or cooler. Is there something internally as you think about that? What sensations am I noticing in my body right now? Where in your body do you feel that? Where are the sensations that you feel? Sometimes people feel things in their feet. Sometimes people feel something in their stomach. Sometimes in their shoulders or their chest. So the location of the sensation. What details of the experience, if the person can describe, it feels tense. How big is it? Is it a, is there a shape that goes with that? Or what's the quality of the tension? Does it feel like it's really gripped inward? Does it feel like it's braced? Observe what happens next. As I observe the feeling of the tension, does it increase, decrease, or stay the same? That's a qualifier kind of question. But you could stay with the particular tension pattern or the sensation. It could be a feeling of expansion, right? What's the feeling of the expansion? Where is it? What is it like? And then what happens next? It could be in that feeling, or maybe as the person feels more expansion, they feel heavier in the legs. They feel more grounded in the legs. So it doesn't have to always be in the same area, but we're tracking or we're noticing the changes in the nervous system. And you can always broaden awareness. I like to do this at the end of a session. How are you feeling overall? So it's not real specific, but how are you doing overall? That can be a nice way to close. Here's an example. We'll look at this slide and then we'll take our break. Here's an example of some different kinds of sensations that people might experience and that you might experience as you sit with your clients, as you are working with refugees, right? As you hear the stories of trauma, as you hear the stories of resilience and survival and capacity, what sensations do you feel? Do you feel calm? Now, calm is an interesting one. Calmness a lot of the time has a feeling of slowness or smoothness. You could go even deeper into that. Energized, the sensations of energy, is it bouncy, buzzy, tingly, flowy, more alive? What's the feeling of aliveness in the body? Yeah. Soft, softening, more relaxed, feelings of openness or spaciousness, temperature shifts, feeling connected. This is a quality sometimes when people have been disconnected, they feel more connected to their embodied self. They feel more present in a way. Safe. I'd go underneath that word to what is the felt sense of safety? How do you know you feel safe in your viscera, in your chest, in your heart, your lungs, your face, your arms, your legs? If someone says, I feel safer, that is a golden moment. If they can feel into the feeling of that. And as they feel the felt sense of safety, much of the time it's like neuroplasticity, like we're practicing it, we're being with it, and we're creating greater states to be able to return to it. Because we come in and out of these states, right? It's never fixed. But we're continuing to develop more and more, hopefully, that neuroception of safety. They might feel relaxed or sore, tight. There can be feelings of shakiness, pulsations. Remember, you'll get this list, we'll email it to you. Tingling, vibration, feeling strong or stable, feeling balanced, feeling disoriented or unbalanced, right? Feeling swimmy or swirly. You could even think about too, people sometimes have things like feeling silky or fuzzy, okay? Sharp, things that slow, right? Things that melt, twitchiness, fluidity, waves, right? You're getting this idea that there can be quite a lot of metaphor in the body, in the internal experience. So when you come back, I'm going to do a demonstration around stabilization tools. So now you know the nervous system, right? And how to track the nervous system. And you'll get to see me working with one of the assistants and how to do that more directly. Let's take a 15-minute break. It is 8:15, right? Yeah. So we'll be back at 8:30. Have a nice break. Oh, and welcome back. I hope you had a nice break. So let's move into a demonstration of some stabilization tools. And Liana has graciously volunteered. So would you be able to spotlight both of us? There we go. Wonderful. So welcome.
Thank you.
How was your break?
Relaxing
Excellent.
and closing shutters.
Uh-huh. I am wondering if we might be able to adjust your camera a little bit because I can only see the front of you. Can you maybe scoot your chair back a bit and we can lower the camera? Just, I don't know how much space you have there, but just so we can see a little bit more of you. Yeah, there we go.
Should
That's
I
good.
put something lighter on?
No, that's fine. And so this is a factor for those of us who do Zoom sessions. If you're tracking the breath or the body or trying to notice changes and someone is very close, you might miss being able to see some of the shifts. So thank you so much for adjusting.
Welcome.
Yeah, I love your beautiful background there.
Thank you.
So I see you kind of adjusting in your chair, you're kind of moving around and checking. Are you kind of checking your seat or your feet or your position as you do that?
Yeah, there is something uncomfortable there, so I'm trying to find my position. At the same time, while I'm doing that, I can feel more my body and also my back resting on the back of the seat.
Wonderful. So would it be okay to take some time with that as you feel your back resting on the seat?
Yeah, because now I realize I was holding my breath kind of in my belly. It was tightened. So it's good to take some time.
Yeah.
I'm noticing a lot of things moving without moving. So my
Yes.
attention goes from the legs and the thighs, they are touching the chair, and my back and my arms as well are touching the back of the chair. And that helped me be more present with what is happening in the front part of my body.
Mhm. So wonderful awareness and tracking skills that you have. And so as you feel, we call it like a grounding, this is a piece of stabilization, to feel that which supports us or the felt sense of connection to gravity. And then your belly loosens and you're able to feel more of what's shifting inside or what's moving.
Yeah. There is something that is moving, which is kind of either behind and in contact with the chair, or in front and in contact with the belly and the breathing. That is moving more my belly than my chest. I cannot feel my chest moving.
It's interesting. You were gesturing to this area as you were talking about it. I'm just wondering if you'd be willing to place your hands where you're gesturing. Just see maybe if that brings a little bit more awareness or if it's helpful in any way. If it's not helpful, you can move them.
Okay, something else is switching.
Hmm.
Like I can feel some warmth on the front part of my body, where I put my hands, and also where my left arm is touching my torso. And I can also feel some emotion coming up to my eyes.
Yeah. So in some way this touches you, or in some ways there's some emotion as you feel the contact, or the external support, we could also call it. Maybe take some moment as you feel your hands and some of the emotion that starts to move with that.
Yeah, that has slowly moved like backwards, like on the wall behind me. But there is more presence in my sides, so it's like feeling the eyes that are more open. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, wonderful. So, and I notice your eyes actually start to look around in the environment as you become more open and aware. So just look around, notice your environment, what you see. You can keep
yeah,
your hands there and move them, however, whatever you want to do, but really just kind of coming into that vision, that presence.
It seems a little strange because the thought came that I'm doing this with you and with in front of everybody. So I had that.
Yes. Understandable, right? Understandable. And I just want to take a moment as that thought comes to honor you for sharing your internal world with us so that we can learn to support ourselves and that we can support others. It really touches me, your willingness to be here with me and with us.
And thank you for being there with me.
Yeah.
While you were speaking, I could feel another wave of emotion that coming to my chest somewhere.
Yeah.
A different type, I cannot name it.
And as you acknowledge the emotion, and I can feel that in the resonance here as we all sit together. Yeah. What's happening now? Do you feel any different? Has anything shifted inside? Is anything?
Yeah, my lower part of the body has started moving, so my legs moving like with the feet pushing on and sliding on the floor.
Okay.
And the movement for adjusting is much more involved in the muscles, so I can feel my muscles touching the chair, and not only the let's say the bones. Before there were the bones and the hard wire of the body. Now it's more as if there were an impulse to move closer to you.
Mm-hmm.
And some happiness, I don't know. I can feel that in my eyes, as if I was the little one.
Yeah, I see
Such
some of
a
that brightness in your smile, and then there seems to be some more energy. So maybe just take a moment to enjoy that feeling of the movement in your feet, the muscles, the bones. Right?
really pleasant.
Yeah, wonderful. So taking time to feel that pleasant quality, and then your breath starts to expand as you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other sensations that go with that feeling in your face, your throat, your chest, belly?
Yeah, another wave of warmth through my chest and going outwards.
Right.
And a little bit of numbness, like as if that was too much.
Interesting. So, and there can be mixed states too, right? So there's expansion in the body, some kind of positive sympathetic feeling, that movement. A lot of the time that younger part is part of exploratory orienting. So as we come into some expansion, it's like, and then the attachment, right? The connection, all of these things might emerge when we're with someone. That lovely feeling of closeness or support, proximity. Yeah, wonderful. So we've actually walked through all of the stabilization tools here. I'm going to name them for everyone, and then maybe we'll choose one to explore kind of as we begin to close. But we started with grounding, and that was that sort of adjusting in the chair and starting to see, right, if you could feel, yeah, some more of that support. But pretty quickly self-contact came in, which is another tool. It's sort of it's making contact with the body in certain places. Many people will just naturally do that, right? So Liana, you were gesturing here, but there was so much moving here. I thought, I wonder if some support or containment or connection to sort of build awareness would be helpful. So we explored this for a while, and things were moving and changing. And then an orienting phase started. So, right, there was more awareness in the eyes, and there was a natural looking around in the environment. So we started to explore that. Then we got a secondary wave of sympathetic activation, right? It was like, oh, right, we're here in this group. And so that was another, we kind of needed to then work with another, I'd say another cycle. We were moving towards integrating that first cycle, and that's common, right? We might have a thought or an association. And so we just notice where the activation is, notice where the settling cycle is, notice where the activation is, notice where the settling cycle is. Then there was some connection, some orienting actually to the group field and our purpose. And that also kind of organized some things. It seemed like it was helpful. Yeah. And then this wonderful movement, right? Some agency. So movement, gentle movement, exploratory movement that the nervous system does. So it's not quite like I'm going to now do a pose, right? Or I'm going to, oh, I've got to shake that off, right? That's voluntary movement. This is involuntary movement. My body starts to do this kind of on its own, right? This extension, and there was a playfulness almost, and a delight and an opening. And here was this sort of, positive sympathetic, which was different from the other ones that seemed to be, there was activation and settling, kind of movement between the two with the other stabilization tools that we use. So grounding, self-contact, orienting, and movement. Those were those 4. And we organically were following, right, Liana, we were following your system. You can invite someone to bring it in, or you can walk somebody through, or you can follow them as they're doing them, and then find out what was the most helpful. So as I go through all of these different stabilization tools, and we're going to do one more. Is there one that you're drawn to that you'd like to spend a little bit more time with?
Actually, in this moment, I'm more into this movement of my legs, as if they're doing like that. So I'm conscious that I'm doing that, but it's like something that is moving. It's doing that. So, and it's pleasant. I can feel the movements. I can feel the legs where the in the joint with the hips, with the and there is some life. There are some energy.
Wonderful. So maybe just takes time to enjoy the feeling of the life and the energy.
And what has changed as well is the feeling of my arms touching the back of the seat. That is again different from before. It's like as if the chair was supporting from behind, and at the same time as if that was a tool, just if I would move while using my hands as well in the space, in the environment.
Yeah, wonderful. I can hear that sort of that integrated movement, right, in the back body.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So as you do that, if it's okay, I'm just going to add one little piece, just again, maybe orient around the room, because you had before you had that sort of feeling in your head. So as you just look around your space, maybe see if there's something around you that you like.
Yeah, now that is needed because it was becoming too much.
Okay, so interesting. We were in a bit of a resonance there. So even pleasant excitation sometimes, the sympathetic was starting to come up. We had a little bit of a numbness or something that happened, like there was a lot of expansion. So there was a feeling as Liana's body is opening, it's good to just kind of anchor it. Like notice where you are and see as you orient, does that help it to feel not as much, or maybe a little bit more contained, or not diminishing it all the way, but maybe settled or different?
It brings more presence right here in the middle of my head. Like if I see the colors of something I painted when I was a little child, or other things around. There's some blue there, and it's refreshing for my sight.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of warmth here now. I felt cold before because it's not too warm here, and I have short sleeves. And now I feel very warm inside.
Great. So maybe let's just follow the warmth for a little while, and then in just a few minutes we'll start to bring this to a close, but just take some more time.
Yeah, it's moving very rapidly. So now the warmth has gone down to the thighs. If I put my hands on my thighs, it's too warm, too much.
So the warmth
like sweating.
Sweating. Yeah, so we actually have a bit of a discharge cycle, it seems to me, that's happening through all of this stabilization that we've been doing, where the system is also kind of rocking back and forth with some excitation and some settling cycles. And we moved from a state of expansion with presence. So it wasn't expansion to numbness, it was expansion with presence. And then there's this lovely discharge wave, right? This sort of reorganization that's happening with that. Yeah. So we are getting close to ending the demonstration now. Your body will continue to process, and I know you know SE, so you'll know what to do, and kind of tracking it and attending to yourself if there's discharge that wants to happen, or maybe just kind of tracking the reorganization after the heat moves through. How are you doing overall, though, as we're closing here?
Yeah, I have a very nice sensation overall. Like my body is smiling, and I don't know why. So it's very the best sensation ever. Those type, smiling and not knowing why. So that means it's very nice.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for volunteering. It's lovely to be with you.
Thank you. And you're welcome.
So I'm going to move back into gallery view again. If you want to keep my video pinned, you can. So those are some of the stabilization tools. And as you saw, we tracked some sensation. One thing that you can do is lead someone through these stabilization tools. Say, would you be willing to try an exercise? And so now allow your head, your neck, and your eyes to look around. And so one is exploratory orienting. It's actually orienting without a specific purpose. So right here and now, allow your head and your neck just to move on their own. Why don't you try it if you're willing to? That can sometimes be a very good reorganization for the lower brain, especially if the amygdala is still feeling like a dangerous encounter is still happening. Because we bring in through our sensory cortex some new information. The trauma is not happening now, right? Or the acute trauma is not happening now, because as we know, for people who are fleeing the war, is that they've escaped some of the acute trauma, but then they're also in new situations, they're resettling. They still are in the process of a lot of the stress unfolding, right? But it can be what we call a relative pocket of safety. A relative pocket of safety. There's ongoing stressors. The trauma is not over, but in comparison, in a way, to the acute danger that you were in. How is it to look around my office? How is it to look around and to know that you and your children have a meal tonight? How is it to be here with me, right? Listening, caring, receiving. So these are some of the things that we could ultimately work with. So then there's also orienting with a purpose. So, right, I might orient to some of the assistants that I know, right, or to Esther, and as a resource, as someone that I'm connected to. And then I have sensations that go with that, feelings of gratitude or openness or warmth. There could be objects or clothing, right? Things in the environment that someone is drawn to. So it's orienting to a resource. Gentle movement will happen throughout a session. Catch the gentle movement. Notice when your bodies start to move. Allow some time after a difficult session to just see, how does my body want to move right now? Okay. Self-contact. There are times after I've worked with someone where I'll just take a moment, I'll put my hand on my chest or a hand on my head. Many of you who I'm actually seeing now are already in a position of some kind of comfort, right? Like there's a lot of folks that are doing this, yeah, or this. Like we all have ways that we touch our face. Okay, these are really common. It's self-contact. It's soothing or supportive. So you might notice a gesture and say, is that familiar? The way your hand does that. Is that a position you find yourself in often? And can you take a moment to take that in as a feeling of support or connection? And as you do that, what sensations do you feel in your body? How do you know that feels supportive? In your face, your throat, your chest, your arms, your legs. Many of these stabilization tools, we're looking for what helps a person to feel better. Okay? And what helps me as the helper to feel better. These are things that I do in a session. So I'm sitting with someone, the activation comes up, the survival physiology is moving around. So right now my ankles, I'm sitting in the chair, I just realized that my ankles are connected, right? They're kind of like this. I sit like this a lot. It feels real, that point of contact between my legs feels really nice. It's also containing, right? Sometimes I like to sit flat, sometimes there's this containing feeling. So I might take a moment to feel the pleasant containment of that while I'm talking to you. I don't even have to pause, but I notice the regulation that happens internally. My belly softens a little bit and I widen a little bit through my torso. Small change, but a change. Okay, so it's where we bring our conscious attention in any given moment that you can increase regulation and stabilization. So I'm going to offer this to you all as skills to please start practicing on yourselves. Okay? Practice them in between sessions. And then if you like, practice with one another. Say, meet up with a colleague, say, can we go through these stabilization tools in this SE webinar that I just learned? And when you feel confident, you say something to them like, is there one or two of those skills that worked for you? Because actually grounding for some people can feel dangerous. They're still stuck in a flight response. So as they feel their legs, they start to feel more numb and their heart rate increases. But for some people, they're going to get, I feel more solid, I feel more settled. They start to breathe more deeply. They start to soften, or they start to shake. They shake for a little while. Remember, we're going to pay attention to that. And then their breath changes. There's a tingling, and then they feel more centered and calm than they have in weeks. Okay. Or maybe it's the orienting. Internal world is too much, but orienting, you observe that they settle in their nervous system as they orient, whether or not they notice it from the inside. So you can start to add these stabilization tools in the debriefing of yourself after the day, or in debriefing when you're working with others. So I want to move kind of towards that skill with the time that we have left. All right. let's do this. I'm just going to cover this slide briefly, and then we're going to go into the stream of life. But here's just a slide on how animals respond to threat. And this is, again, one of the things that happens in the nervous system. And when I describe trauma to someone, a lot of the time I'm talking about are the mammals inside of us, the animals inside of us, right? We respond to real or perceived danger, and we go into startle. There's a cessation of movement, which is an arrest, and we're in an evaluation phase. Then we orient to the danger, we try to. So you go from wide to defensive orienting. And then we evaluate. We may go into an active defensive response. Some of that would be vocalization, right? Verbal strategies. It could be fight and flight. Those are active protective responses. Or we might go into a passive protective response, which is a freeze response. Then after this cycle, the body and the lower brain recognizes the threat has passed, or I'm in a relative pocket of safety in this moment, enough that I can downregulate. I don't need to this pattern of trauma is where the physiology continues to be kindled in the present moment. Okay, so we're going to do some of our settling, our stabilization tools.
Weiß ich nicht, was für ein Lautsprecher da nicht.
In relationship to the nervous system, to allow there to be, right, a settling wave or a reorganization or the coming out of these survival responses. There's a nervous system resetting that goes on, maybe some discharge, right? And also back to some social engagement. As we feel more regulated, we have more capacity to take in, even structurally, neuroanatomically, a feeling of social engagement. Okay. So that's in the background of some of what you're going to see next. Okay. So I'm going to show you a picture here. This is another model from our SE training. And we're going to do another demonstration soon. And this is called the stream of life model. So I've done my best to draw you this little picture here. Maybe we could make me big on the screen. Maybe you could pin my video for this. Yeah, great. Okay, so there's the river of life and a person in a boat floating down the river of life. And there are rocks in the river of life, and those are little developmental challenges. They're difficult times that we bump up against. But when the boat comes up to one of those rocks, the river of life carries it around the river, and we continue to move forward. Or maybe we get stuck for a while on the rock, but we push ourselves off, and then that stream of life carries us forward in time. Now here's that lightning bolt. Freud talks about trauma as being a breach in the protective barrier of the self. A breach in the protective barrier of the self. And so what happens when there's a breach in the bank of a river is that the water flow changes. And there's a big swirl that happens. The water gets pulled out of the breached bank, and it creates a vortex outside of the river of life. We call this the trauma vortex. I'm just going to write TV for now, okay? And in the trauma vortex, there are all different kinds of sensations, behaviors, and emotions. And when the person moves their river and down the river of life in the boat, they keep getting pulled up into that trauma vortex. So some of our job from our physiological somatic experiencing model is to create something to counter the trauma vortex in the stream of life. And we call this the counter vortex. So there's this counter vortex on the other side, okay? And Peter Levine used to call the counter vortex the healing vortex. You may hear some trainers also still call it the healing vortex. But the reason why many of us call it the counter vortex is that it's the movement between the trauma vortex and the counter vortex that creates the healing. So it's the movement between that creates the healing. And this is this movement between expansion and contraction of all things. And we call it pendulation. Pendulation in the nervous system and pendulation through content. Now, content can often help influence the nervous system, right? So what you're talking about, there's usually something in the resonance that follows that. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper into what that means. Or now you can keep me large here. I'm going back to gallery view so I can see you all. Okay. So a few things that we might begin to build to create that feeling of that counter vortex. Okay, one are the stabilization tools. Catch them as they're happening. Teach people to do them. What helps me to regulate? And then how do I know I feel better? What are the sensations that tell me I'm regulating better? It might only be a 10% change, but at least they're learning to not have that negative bias of tracking what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. We're actually quite good at that. But what's different? What's better? What's more okay? Okay, so we've got the physiological shift. You also might begin to ask people, what is it that they do that helps them? So, right, we saw that earlier when we were talking about the window of tolerance. So what do you do that helps to bring you in the window of tolerance? And for many people, they'll talk about what we're going to call resources. There's two different kinds of resources. Some are internal and some are external. An internal resource is a place usually in your body that you can go that helps you to feel better. So for me, when I ground through my legs, as I feel my legs, it usually helps me to downregulate. That's a very good kind of consistent place that I can notice the feeling of support of gravity, and it helps me to be more internal and more parasympathetic. It could be an area that's less tense, right? That's more relaxed. It could be a sense of aliveness, right? That came up as we tracked a couple of different times. It could be a feeling of movement, right? I have the capacity to move. Or I used to have this place, it doesn't work anymore, but I used to touch right here on the front of my neck, and it really helped me to regulate. When I felt real panicky, I could do this and press really hard. And I would start to feel some kind of organization on the inside. It would start to lower some of that signaling of high constriction and energy that felt quite trapped, right, or charged. Okay. Positive emotion, or emotion that waves through and then the person feels more solid, connected, or better. Okay, so those are some different kinds of internal resources. We have a lot of external resources as well, and I'll put up a screen share of this slide. This list could just go on and on and on and on. So these are a few small examples, things in the environment that you're drawn to, that regulate you, that help you, that are meaningful for you. I have my grandmother's lamp over here, and I orient to it a lot. Okay. Moments of kindness, a person who gave you food, water, a blanket, a smile, right? A connection to community and social networks. I feel that as I'm sitting here with all of you, right? Positive elements in the environment, anything. I mean, even this, I like the squishiness of my office chair. There's the foam, I like the foam in it. So that's tactile, but I can just in this moment appreciate one thing or take in one thing. Yeah. Objects, food, daily necessities. And that's also really important with refugees, right? Do they have their basic needs taken care of, and can you help connect them to the basic needs? But as they receive them, how does that feel? You know, is there something that feels supportive about that? Safe touch, family, friends, children, partners, pets, taking that in when that's occurring. A lot of the time we're just going on autopilot, right? And then I'll let you actually take a look at it. I'm not going to go through it, but there's also cultural resources. So when groups can gather and they could dance, sew, sing, rebuild, do projects together, sort of meaningful contact in the collective, rituals from the particular culture, taking turns caring for children, things that bring us into a felt sense of community. And then again, noticing if there's a felt shift that happens for people in their bodies as they're engaging and supporting one another. Now, in any time that you are speaking with someone, there's often the trauma vortex is leading, right? You're hearing about the difficulties and the stressors. And there is something very important about all of us being able to share our difficulties. Your empathic attunement, your listening, your non-judgmental receiving is a part of the counter vortex. If it feels relevant, you might say, how does it feel to feel listened to right now? Yeah. Just start to bridge in. They're talking trauma, trauma. If we're listening to the nervous system, trauma, trauma, constriction, constriction, gurgle, gurgle, tingle, tingle. Like I'm listening to the body story just as much as the content. And then I say, how is it to be here with me and to have someone listening? And then there's a wave of tears. And then I see the breath expanding and then a softening. They say, it feels really good to be able to be here. Or I can feel like I can finally let down. And just take some time to notice that expansion as you say that. Okay. Now, other things that you might help facilitate pendulation in content are things like, what helped you survive? How did you get through that incredibly difficult or dangerous experience? What are you doing now that's making a difference for you and your family? These are survival decisions, so we can thank our nervous system for helping or doing something well. We also might notice things in the moment, like taking agency, because there can be such a deep felt sense of hopelessness or helplessness. So ways in which people are taking action, ways in which they are caring for themselves or their family, the ways that they can get involved with helping others, that often can really help restore a sense of agency. What helps you to resist? As you feel the outrage, would you be willing to stand up and notice, right, the feeling of that, the power, the anger, yeah, but expand. And then what are some things in ways that they can channel that outrage? What are things that they can do to mobilize? Okay. What's helping you to get through each day? Another really good question. What decisions have you made that have been life-saving? Yeah. Also things like, if someone were in your situation, a friend were in your situation, what advice would you give them? Sometimes we can't take our own good advice, right? And then notice how that is as they speak that out loud. Has your family survived similar situations? We have transgenerational trauma, but we also have transgenerational survival and healing. Is there wisdom from the generations that we might be able to think about and to connect to as a deep felt sense, as a deep resource, right? To move through. And also any time that they bring in their own resource. So in any trauma narrative, or again, for helping the helpers, your own narrative, when you talk about how hard it is sometimes, you might notice that at the same time, then you think, oh yes, it's so hard. And I was at this webinar and there were all these people doing this amazing work. Okay, so you can orient to something else or something that helps to hold you, right? There's always some sort of, there can be a movement in the narrative. Yeah, we finally made it to safety. Take a moment there as you remember that moment. You finally made it to safety. And what do you sense in your body right now as you think about that? Okay. So let me demonstrate this pendulation. And I know we're getting close to our close. It's just been wonderful to be with you all. So Gulsha has volunteered to do our next demo on pendulation. And already, so I'd like to mirror a moment of, I'm orienting too. So I'm going to be doing a process at the same time as Gulsha, and I'm orienting to your beautiful orchids. Are you an orchid person?
I became an orchid person in the last 2 years over quarantine.
Aha. What do you like about orchids?
I like that you don't just have to water them, but you have to pay attention and pay attention to the roots and nurture them. I think that's the part I like. And I lived during quarantine, it was just me and my cats. And so I think I wanted something alive that I could really interact with. So that really helped. And now I've gone a bit crazy. I have like over 20 of them, but
I'm a plant person too, so I resonate. And so would you be willing, you kind of talked about the orchids and you were moving, your hands went out, you're talking about sort of them growing, and would you be willing just to do that again and notice how you feel in your body as you sense into that?
feel the breath coming in like towards, in this direction, towards my shoulders a bit.
Yeah. Does that feel pleasant, unpleasant, neutral?
It feels pleasant.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. I would just see that lovely movement that you're making and that expansion and the breath. And,
My eyes are also like checking out the environment I'm noticing.
what do you see as you check out the environment?
Really, I wasn't really looking at something, but like kind of scanning, like, is everything? Because I'm also hearing sounds in the background, and
Is
my
that in
cats,
my environment or your environment?
in my cats are doing something, and so I guess I'm feeling the need to like, what are they doing? Kind of like I'm getting that in the background.
And then there's a bit of a deep breath as you say that. So right now we're exploring an external resource, which is the orchids. And then, as Gulsha is feeling into that, there was a movement, an exploratory movement as a resource. There's some orienting in the present moment that's happening, right? And so I'm wondering if we can move into some content just to demonstrate some more skills. And we had talked earlier about the potential of you sharing some more about your professional experience. And so I'm wondering, in what ways are you working right now? And are there times where you're feeling like some of that survival physiology gets kicked up in you, or is feeling where maybe a time or times where that's present?
Um, the most often it comes into play, I would say, is when I am working with a client on something related to loss. Loss is a theme in my life, and I've become much better at containing it, and I've worked on it. But still, when I hear I think I might even begin to sense it in the resonance at first. But when I start hearing about it, something kicks in, and I feel, okay, really make sure that you're grounded. Really make sure that you can feel that you're in your chair. So
Yeah. As you're talking about it now, even,
yeah,
do you notice the chair underneath you?
I do.
Yeah.
And I'm also noticing this very, very slight, like shoulders coming in forward a little bit
Okay. So,
here.
brought your hand here. Would you be willing to just, again, kind of feel the grounding, but maybe with your hands here, and just let that tightening be there, but at the same time, feeling your ground, feeling your hands. Just give that some time.
My breath has become a bit more shallow. I am also noticing that now. So. Hmm.
There, so as you stay with it, then there was just a, much kind of bigger breath. That's it.
There's this backward movement, like really sensing the back of the chair coming in.
Yeah, and I can see as your breath, your back actually almost like widens a little bit.
Now my elbows are doing this on their own.
Mhm. Wonderful. So involuntary movement, let's explore that. Mm.
There's this very slight, like quivering in my shoulders that I'm feeling.
Mhm. Can you let that quivering just be there? Just whether it bounces around a bit or it's more internal.
The parts under my thumbs, I can feel things moving underneath, and I'm not moving them
Yeah.
voluntarily anyway.
Yeah, so there's some kind of involuntary movement that's sort of happening from the inside. Let's kind of track and follow that for a little longer. You're doing great. Yeah. Yeah. And then your neck moves as well, right? It's starting to move on its own. I'm wondering something as you look more expanded in your chest, right? And almost more open through the shoulders. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is accurate.
Okay. So I'm wondering, just for a matter of time here, and we could follow this implicit process for quite a while, but as you feel this more expanded state, and maybe just bring your attention back to when you sit with one of your clients who's experiencing grief, right? Or you hear the grief and it touches you. and the resonance, and just notice what it feels like now as you feel some more of that expansion, how that touches you.
My shoulders don't feel the need to like close up again, and it's the idea of it, there's more room for it, it feels like.
Yeah. Oh, that was so interesting. You did this movement, which was kind of like the orchid movement too. So there's more room for it. So what is it like, the resonance of the grief or the echo of that right now, right? With more expansion, more room for it. What do you sense in your body with that?
I feel my sit bones heavier in the chair, not in the like it's pulling me down, but like more presence. Uh, and my lower back also feels more present here as well. It feels like there is this bubble in front of me now, and I can both maybe stay with what's mine a bit easier, and also stay with what's there is easier. And the bubbles might touch, and that's okay, but it's not like I need to actively defend that bubble or protect that bubble. It's there.
Yeah.
And yeah, and there's this.
Yeah, so some sort of, I'm going to call it maybe integration or some movements that come. So we're going to need to come to a close. Is there anything else you want to say or share about this pendulation process that we did together?
Thank you for the containing and the holding. I feel even just that little bit of pendulation really helped something come in that is very supportive, and I can take into the future as well, that sense of kind of like an astronaut's helmet, kind of. It's not that hard, but like it's rounded, and there's like a sheen to it. I don't know. It looks nice.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. It was wonderful to be with you.
Thank you, Abi.
So we could have pendulated a bit more through content, examples, if we had more time. With Gulsha might have been, who helped you with the grief, who helps you now, what do you do when you feel grief, what actions do you take, what resources do you have? And of course, there might be body elements that we see, or when we're pendulating through the content, the nervous system is following. If we can bring attention to the positive shifts in the body, in the counter vortex. So especially with people with a lot of heightened trauma and trauma that's happening right now, I'd rather invite them to notice when their body is feeling better than all about the survival physiology or the stress or the sadness or the grief. But can they feel the grief supported by their hand? Okay. One thing I did want to touch in on, and then we'll do a brief review of what we've gone over, is to talk about, well, survivor guilt for many of you who are working with refugees from this conflict and other conflicts. But there are people, right, that we love or people that they love who are still in danger. And so it can be very difficult to feel one's own aliveness, right? And that is a natural empathic response to the people that we love. I think about a book, it's a children's book, it's called The Invisible Thread. It's actually written for kids who are going to school. And it's this idea that even though you separate from your caregivers, there's this invisible thread that connects you. So acknowledging that invisible thread. And at the same time, is there a way in which you're dampening your life force to be connected to those who are still in danger? What would they want for you? If you name that very explicitly, would they want you to do that, right? And then sometimes they can imagine a conversation, or they can even have a conversation if that's possible. They can also, again, notice how those responses are entwined with the people that they love, and particularly looking for places of agency. So even though I'm afar, what is it that I can do to try to make a difference in my life, our children's lives, right? How can I get involved? Those kinds of shifts can often help people to feel less stuck, right? Can they make calls? Can they do different kinds of things that help politically? And that, I think, just that deep acknowledgement, right? And the love that we feel, to feel the love and to feel the support from afar. And then also know that our bodies, no matter what, our bodies, our animal bodies, are grateful that we survived. And this is a relative pocket of safety. Can they, from their lower brain, begin to access that? Knowing that their loved ones are still in danger, but can they notice a relative pocket of safety and stay connected but not merged? Okay. So I just wanted to name that because I know so many of you are working with refugees, and that's one complication that might come up as people start to feel the countervortex. They'll feel guilty about feeling the countervortex, right? But as they expand and contract, they'll have more capacity to help their loved ones and their communities and to move forward. So here's our review slide as we're beginning to come to a close here. What are things that we can do? These are for ourselves and for the people that we serve. So find stabilization tools that help the nervous system come out of survival physiology. How do you know you feel more regulated? Try some things, right? With Gulsha, we noticed several things that she did naturally and brought attention to them. Listen to the needs the person has. Help provide a connection to physical needs being met as best as possible. So we want to make sure that we have our basics tended to. Look around your own environment and make sure you're tending to your sleep and your food and your exercise to the best that you can as you help others. Listen for the emotional hardships or the symptoms of trauma, right? You could have them draw the autonomic nervous system chart. Are they stuck on high? Are they stuck on low? When are they stuck on high? When are they stuck on low? And what things might they do or learn that helps them to come out of that? Even just thinking behaviorally, identify it, and I have some strategies. And then you might be able to help them notice, how do they feel slightly better or less stuck? Ask them, what helps you to regulate? There could be this feeling in the body, like the movement, couple movements came up from the demonstration volunteers that helped them feel more alive, right? More awake. Or it could be a grounded feeling or an external resource, a lot of external resources. What you see, what you hear, what you feel. You can orient through all the 5 senses. And then also, as they talk about, or as you think about traumatic moments at the end of your day, interrupt, shift, move to the countervortex, notice what's around you, listen to the sound, take in the grounding, put your hand over your heart when you feel impacted by something someone says, and feel the containment and the support from your own body to yourself, to your physiology, and let that reorganize you from the inside out. Just these moments of movement that happen. Okay, so these are some of the suggestions and tools, techniques, theories that I want to offer to all of you. And that these are the helping helpers in the world. Thank you for spending time. It's been really lovely and wonderful to be with you all. Esther, is there anything you want to say as we close?
Yeah, Abby, thank you so much for being here with us and offering your enormous knowledge on this field. And I am amazed. I don't know how you do it to bring this many things in 2.5 hours with even 4 short demos. Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing what you know. And thank you for everybody being here. I hope you found this evening very useful for you. Thank you for the assistant team and also the interpreters and Sylvie, our tech person. Thank you so much for all the help and support.
And thank you for helping to organize this and bring us all together. And may you all be well and take care. Sense into the resonant field. We're all together. Okay. Bye.
Sziasztok, szép estét! Sziasztok!